Today's episode is being recorded on what would have been my mother's 71st birthday. It is her memory that inspires the excerpt reading for today's episode. The excerpt is from my book, my memoir, Liberated from the Hill, that comes out next year in 2021. And this is how it reads. Mama had transferred me from the neighborhood school after my second grade year. I passed the test to be eligible to attend Buist Academy for the gifted and talented. I hated it. My first year, I was a temper-driven terror. I did everything I could think of to get out of that school. I hit other third graders, I destroyed a computer, and caused so much trouble on the school bus, I nearly got banned from riding it. My third grade attempts to get kicked out were futile. I thought there was some kind of conspiracy to keep me there. Buist Academy was an academic magnet school educating children from kindergarten to 8th grade. Excelling there meant far more than going the extra mile, because the extra mile was built into the curriculum. Today, we're going to be talking with a woman who has a lot to do with that curriculum. Jean Murray was the first principal of Buist Academy. And we're going to talk to her today about diversity in education and magnet schools like Buist and what they were originally intended to do. We're also going to get her long tenured, and you're going to want to hear her experience on current events and how they affect education and the education system in Charleston County and other states and just across the country. And then, of course, I'm going to want to hear your opinion on what you've just heard. So join the conversation. Hello, Miss Murray. How are you?
I am well today, thank you. And I've been thinking about this for days and what it means to hear from a former student, even one who didn't want to be there.
It eventually changed. Do you remember me being a temper-driven terror? I hope you don't remember that, actually.
I see, I only remember the good things.
Oh, good. Yes. I'm happy to hear that. I love that it came full circle that you were able to actually put my high school diploma in my hand when I walked across that stage graduating from North Charleston High School.
That was exciting too.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So I want to go ahead and jump into your background because you have had 40 plus years in
43,
local.
Yeah.
Wow. 43
well, 43
years.
in public, yes, 43 in
public education. Yeah. And across several states, Alabama, Virginia, South Carolina, right?
Yes. Yeah. I did consulting in states outside of Virginia and South Carolina, in Georgia, Alabama, Texas.
Oh, wow.
California.
Wow.
With the company that I was working with.
You've been around, but you eventually came back home, right?
Yeah, I was missing that sand between my toes.
Yes.
Had to get back to the coast.
So let's go back. What actually got you into education? What made you want to do education from the beginning?
Well, I think all young people play school with your younger siblings. I certainly did that. My mother and father were both in education. I had friends I remember in the 6th grade, we opened a day school in a carport, and parents paid $1.25 a week for their little ones to come spend a couple of hours with us in the carport. We had a very structured schedule and curriculum, and it's just always been what I was going to do.
Wow.
So I went to Newberry College in South Carolina and got my degree, and ultimately started teaching in
what led you to Buist? Like, how did Buist come about? What was that kind of what was the environment, first of all, and what kind of led you to Buist when it opened? What was presented to you?
I had the honor of spending a year chairing, I can't think of another word for it, leading, maybe a better word, a community committee organized by Dr. Ron McWhird, who was superintendent at the time, to talk about what kind, what what efforts we could put in place in downtown Charleston to bring about a more diverse, integrated academic environment. And I spent a year while I was Meminger at Buist. Meminger, I was
Mhm.
principal at Meminger, and Pat Bauer took over my building a day a week, I think, maybe 2 days a week. And I did the research and looked into the different organizations of schools that people around the country were using.
Okay.
Um, Even before the terminology closing the achievement gap was part of what was being discussed, but it was part of what school divisions were trying to accomplish in providing more diverse, integrated environments for all students.
Okay.
And I presented that research to the community members um, as they struggled with and dealt with what the research said around the country. There were all kinds of different school structured organizations that school divisions were using,
Mhm.
magnet schools being one of them.
Okay.
And Buist Academy proposal grew out of that. The proposal from the community committee was presented to the school board, and the school board adopted it. And the the building that is currently Buist Academy was a closed Buist Elementary School on
Right.
Calhoun Street in downtown Charleston. It
Right.
had been closed for a number of years, and there were offices in that building.
Right. Right. I heard kind of whispers when I was younger about the closed school. I remember my mother and my grandmother talking about the school building where it was going to be. And I was always curious as to what it was before 1985 when we got there. Of course, I got there in the third grade, but I was very curious as to what it was before. When did the school, if you recall, when did the school close? How much time was it between the original closure to the opening of Buist Academy?
I would be afraid to give an exact date. I do think it had been closed um, at least 3 years at that point.
Oh, not too
Our
long.
area superintendent's office was located in that building, and the District 20 school board met in that building. Um,
Okay. Okay.
and I think there were other programs, perhaps. I'm not remembering clearly everything that went on in that building.
Okay, so they didn't have to do a lot of renovation or anything like that to prepare for us when we came.
They had to do a lot of renovation.
Oh, oh,
building,
oh,
the
wow.
building was quite old, and I think 1953 maybe. Um, and there had not been a lot of work done on it since they were moving towards closing it. And
Wow.
so new windows had to be done. The whole front end of the building had to be redone. As a matter of fact, a funny story that I remember when they started knocking walls down in the front area where the offices were, the the frame was sitting on dirt. There
Hmm.
was no foundation under it, and it was riddled
Wow.
with termites. So
Wow.
it took a lot of renovation on the windows had to be replaced. There was no air. Air conditioning had to be put in. So a lot of renovation took place.
Good
Um,
night.
and a lot has taken place since then, since
I'm sure.
30 plus years ago. So
I'm sure. So, okay, so you put together a report to kind of start putting together what a magnet school looked like. Magnet schools, I wasn't aware, of course, being so little and so young, I wasn't aware what magnet schools were. As I've gotten older, I began to understand what the term kind of means, where the goal, and please correct me because I'm going to ask you, the goal of magnet schools in general. So I'm not talking about Buist per se. The goal of magnet schools in general, is it to draw students from across different boundaries, different like school zoned areas? What is the ultimate goal of magnet schools? Because I thought it was just to have a bunch of smart kids together. That's what I thought.
The way I always thought about it was the same way I learned to use magnets, which was to attract many different kinds of students from very different kinds of backgrounds to come together in one place for strong academic learning. What you said at the beginning, I've been processing a little bit about. It wasn't about going the extra mile. The extra mile was built into what we did. It was a very project oriented, hands on, integrated curriculum. And that was our intent, that the learning would take place in a context in which you would use the information and the material that you were learning.
Okay.
So you mentioned your fifth grade teacher. I know one year he built a hydroponic lab in his classroom. I don't know whether you were in the classroom that year or not, but it was about watching things and doing things and experimenting in order to put reading, writing, math, science, and computer science into a context of project learning.
Wow. That's that's awesome. No, I was not there for that. I wish I was. I really wish I was, but I still consider Mr. Z my favorite teacher of all time. He was amazing.
Oh, and you can remember his name and his nickname, so that's really cool.
Oh yeah, I think that is the first thing, how you know that's the teacher that you cling to, and I still hold to. I I think also because his wife made that amazing cheese bread that she it was amazing. So that might be why as well. That might be why as well. So as you guys are putting it together, how did you guys go about bringing in this? So for example, I guess, how did I end up there? Were the tests sent out? Like how did you guys begin to build the student body of Buist in 1985?
We were using standardized tests for the students who took them, and third graders, third, fifth, seventh, I can't remember what grades at that particular time. And we used a lottery system for students who qualified. So you put your application in, and if you qualified, you went into a database. And the lottery system was based on an average of the county school age population at the time. I don't know how much of that average is still the same, but it was 60% white, 40% minority. And it was written that way, 60%, 40%. And we ran a lottery on each grade level based on all the students who qualified and to meet the the percentages that had been passed in the proposal for Buist Academy. And at the time, Buist Academy was called Buist Academy for Math, Science, and Computer Science. It's an international bat. Do you remember doing science projects?
I do remember very clearly. Very clearly.
Yep, that was part of. We started doing math and science projects as classes and then as small groups, and we started in kindergarten. So by the time students got to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, they pretty much understood the scientific process and what they were supposed to do to prepare a science project. Many students continued that project idea into high school. So they would start a project, say 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, and continue to develop on the scientific process as they went into high school.
Okay. So you based it on the population there, the population of the city. I clearly remember it being very, very diverse. I remember it opening. It was my first experience, I'll say first real, authentic experience with people of other races, kids of other races, because now I was taken out of, I know people like to say predominantly Black. I'm very honest. I came from an all Black neighborhood in Liberty Hill, let's be honest, an all Black neighborhood.
And Berry Elementary School, which also was an all Black school.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Our principal was Mr. Willis, a Black man. It was going to Buist was a culture shock for me. It was a culture shock, but more so it was, when you're 7, 8 years old, it's the biggest thing is just being taken away from your friends. Mm-hmm. And when your friends all look like you, and all of a sudden you're placed in an environment where they don't look like you, thankfully kids have the amazing ability to adapt very quickly. And mm-hmm. so it formed relationships, and it formed my way of creating relationships that I have even to this day. And so that's probably—
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it has a lot to do with how diverse the school was. And it was so promoted just in the way that we all interacted with each other. I cannot express how, I remember going to my first birthday party at a white child's house. And I remember, even because this is the 80s, right? This is the 80s. And so we're only
late 80s.
Yeah, late 80s. And so I remember I remember how the shift began to happen between my friendships in my neighborhood versus my friendships at my school. And how all of a sudden, even within my neighborhood, as I began to say things like, well, I'm going to my friend's birthday party, and they would ask, where is it? And I might say Isle of Palms or Sullivan's Island. And the shock, the look, wait, how do you know anyone that lives over there? What? And so I remember the shift that happened in the midst of my friendships. And I remember how that affected how I made friends from that point on. It was, Buist has then, and I'm talking then, Buist had an amazing ability to instill in children not just a great education, but a great concept of what the world could be and what the world could look like. Does that make sense?
It does, and there's a lot, and even more important now, there's a lot of research going on about creating school environments where social and emotional learning are taking place. And with kids coming back into school after having been out for 6 months, even more important that a connection be made with their teacher and with their classmates
Yes.
in an environment in which you can't touch. And social emotional learning, if if a student develops a safe feeling within
Mhm.
the environment around the people, the teachers and the classmates,
Yeah.
then that's one less thing they have to worry about.
Yes.
That social, emotional, particularly where kids feel that in middle school or when they're in isolation,
Right.
or they're the only one. And you mentioned having experienced some bullying,
Yes.
which we tried very, very hard to know about
Mhm.
and to eliminate.
Mm.
But the social emotional part of bringing kids from all over Charleston County into an environment was something, sounds kind of funny now, was something we called Buistness,
Hmm. That's
Buistness.
interesting.
And it was about creating an environment where uh, everyone was in an environment that was safe to learn.
Mhm.
Everyone was in an environment to be challenged and to feel comfortable in being challenged,
Hmm.
not to feel an uncomfortable uh, rivalry.
Right.
Although I know that always exists, but uh,
Right.
every student was singled out as a student who we were going to make successful
Mhm.
as best we
Hmm.
could. Anything that was on the other side of that, we had no control over.
Right.
But the learning process, the social emotional process, the environment in which we lived in that 3-story building was about a safe learning environment.
Right. I can even remember. I remember specifically the guidance counselor. One of our the guidance counselor. Her name was Miss Lucas.
That's
I
right.
remember her clearly because during those bullying experiences, I went to see her, and she was very supportive. She was very encouraging. Um, um, very insistent upon making me realize self confidence, um, increasing my self esteem, highlighting the positive things about myself, and it 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 helped me to stay from third to eighth grade. um,
Ah,
it
good Linda
really did.
Lucas. Go Linda Lucas. Go Linda
Yeah, she was amazing, and I think that's very important because school isn't just teachers and principals, right?
That's
It's
right.
it's custodians, it's guidance counselors, it's the cafeteria workers, it's everyone, it's
That's right.
everyone.
That's right. And
So
everybody has a role in creating that environment, of knowing every kid's name, of
yes,
knowing something about every kid, and being sure to create not only the school environment, but the classroom environment.
yes, so important, so important. So let's talk about what Buist has.
Who was your third grade teacher?
Sue Fike, yes, Miss Fike,
Miss Fike. Hmm.
and she.
I
Go
thought
ahead.
it probably was. I thought it probably was. I was just trying to remember.
Yep, Miss Fike, and she ultimately became part of the eighth taught. I can't remember what she taught me in eighth grade, but she somehow went to the middle school and she taught me something in eighth grade. And I ended up going on my eighth grade trip with her to Washington, D.C. A group of students. She took a group of students to Washington, D.C. after we graduated from eighth grade.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I remember her very clearly. And then a few years later, she became teacher of the year.
She did.
Yeah.
That was when Miss Trifoletti was principal there. I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, I totally remember her. Wonderful, one of another teacher that had a great impact. I'm telling you, I can give you every single teacher from third to eighth grade. I just remember Mr. Z as my favorite. Every
Right.
single teacher.
Right. Gotcha.
Um, I look back on those years fondly. I really do. So let's talk about Buist now. So I have been out of I've been in LA for a long, long time. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina before I moved to LA, but of course I went home quite often. Um, and I stay up on news and all that stuff. And so I saw in December where there was this huge meeting where they were making the changes within the school system regarding completely taking out kindergarten, first and second grade from Buist in an effort to increase the classes so they can increase diversity. Um, and I know you were gone,
Right.
because before I even graduated from Buist, you had left. I remember Miss Trifoletti.
Mm-hmm.
So but were you still in Charleston? How long were you in Charleston County before you began to go to other states to work in
When
the system?
when I left Buist, I had been accepted into a program at the Harvard Graduate School of Education called the Urban Superintendent's Program.
Okay.
And I spent 2 years in and out, but 2 years in Cambridge, Massachusetts,
Wow.
working on my doctorate. And I did a superintendent's internship in the Atlanta area
Wow.
during that time. When I came back, and you mentioned it earlier, I became the area assistant superintendent in North Charleston.
Yes.
And that's how I ended up giving you your diploma at North
Yes.
Charleston High School.
Yes.
And I was area assistant superintendent for 5 years in Charleston County, in North Charleston, and um, all the schools that you were familiar with at the time, Berry and North Charleston Elementary, and all of the schools in that area around Park Circle and Liberty Hill. And then I went to Virginia.
Okay.
So I went to Virginia somewhere around 1999.
Okay.
And I was in Virginia for 11 years um, before I retired from Virginia
Got it.
and started consulting.
Okay. Okay. So at this point, you had been around. Um, one of the been around the school system.
I've been around a while too, Ruthina. So.
So, um, I guess my thing is I read about, because I'm not an educational professional, but I'm a news reader, and I've seen that some of the issues that youth had when it comes to diversity is not isolated. There were issues with schools in New York when it came to magnet schools and diversity. There's been issues. I read stories about a school in Boston where there were issues with a huge magnet school there, and there were and this was recently, as of like in January, where there was a school there that had issues. And the biggest thing is making the population of the school reflect the population of the area that it's in, right? So I am curious how what the shift is, because Buist started out well. So I'm curious as to your opinion on where the shift happened that caused all the necessary changes that have occurred within the last 6 months to increase diversity at Buist.
Sometime after I left Charleston County,
Okay.
which would have been in 98, 97, 98, somewhere in that time frame. The school district was sued over the 60-40 ratio.
What?
And as a result of that, the ratio was removed. So it was not a controlled ratio any longer. It was still a county-wide school, students still came in from all over the county, but not in a controlled ratio. And I do not know the type of recruitment that was being done at that time. Since I was not there, I can't speak to it. But I do know that my last conversation some 4 or 5 years ago with Mrs. White was that it was very difficult to attract minority applicants at that point. And I can't speak to what happened over time.
Okay.
Because I wasn't there. And at some point, even after the ratio changed, the school applied to and became a middle level international baccalaureate and a primary school international baccalaureate, which was one of the things that we had explored in depth prior to opening Buist. But at the time, financially, we weren't able to do everything else that we wanted to do and apply for international baccalaureate as well. So I think the parents were very active and involved in getting the international baccalaureate program into Buist Academy, both in the early years program and in the middle years program.
Wow. Wow. You just kind of blew my mind. I wanted to put that comment up. Someone's enjoying our conversation here.
Oh, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lily.
Yeah, she's an educator. She did have a question about the 60-40 ratio and what that entailed.
It was representative of the school age population in Charleston County in 1984-85 when we were planning the school. That's how we came to the 60-40. There were other school districts had come up with other ratios. There was 45-55. There were different ratios that magnet schools operated on. And the formula that we came up with was just that formula that worked best for Charleston County, I guess, at the time. And every grade level, and throughout the entire school. So
Right.
it was every grade level had that ratio, the entire school had that ratio. So that the diversity and creating that environment for all students was very controlled. It was,
Wow.
and all the students there were not necessarily at the level of gifted and talented,
Okay.
but they were all high performing academic students. The gifted and talented academic level was actually higher. Now, did we have students there who were gifted and talented? Yeah. Did we have students there who were academically high performers? Absolutely. And like I said, we did everything at the school level we could to make sure that they continued to show success within themselves.
Yeah.
and success in their academic performance.
Right. I love that the controlled aspect of it. I didn't realize that even applied within the classroom. In my mind, initially, I thought just in the school overall, but you're speaking specifically within the classroom. I think a question is coming in saying, when you talk 60-40, you're talking specifically race and socioeconomic economic diversity,
Race.
everything. Race. Oh,
Right.
just race.
Mhm.
But I didn't know it
Now,
was that.
we had students who were on, well, we measured socioeconomics based on free and reduced lunch. So we had students who were on free and reduced lunch. Um, we had students who weren't.
Right.
So it was an economic diversity as well, but it wasn't controlled for that.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. So I know one of the part of the uproar this year within the last 6 months regarding the school today was the whole idea of reaching beyond the school zone areas where a lot of the students were coming in. Now, I researched and I did see that as of right now, the new crop that that Buist Academy accepted in, more than 50% was minority, and
Great.
yeah, more than 50% was minority. They accepted 112 students, and 96% of them were from high poverty areas. That wasn't the case before. Before initially, and I'm talking to the 2019-2020 school year. During that school year, it was only 8% of the student body was Black.
Mm.
And around that same number came from high poverty areas, while everyone else came from not high poverty.
Right.
So, so the changes they're being attempted. I guess my concern is, how do we prevent this? How do we prevent this from happening again? Do you feel like it's current events that have affected how these schools are approaching admissions now?
Interesting. I know Dr. Postlethwaite has been very um, interested in creating more diverse environments throughout the county.
Okay.
In 1968, when Charleston County School Division consolidated, 67, 68,
Okay.
the part of the act of consolidation was to leave geographic areas in constituent districts. A lot of that has I see that face. Um, so you had District 20 downtown. You had
Yes.
North Charleston. You had Mount Pleasant. You had James Island. You had Johns Island. And each of those constituent districts had a constituent school board.
Okay.
And those constituent school boards still exist, I think. The role of the area superintendent has changed. And the role of the constituent district school board was student and teacher placement. And students were not supposed to cross district lines. So one of the things that we were able to do with Buist Academy as the first magnet school was to get the constituent school boards to allow students to come from other school districts downtown. And that was
Okay.
one of the things that had to be accomplished in order for Buist to be created as a magnet school with a diverse population.
Right.
And it those I can't even speak to what the constituent school boards or the even if they exist anymore, because I just simply haven't been there. I
Right.
don't
Of
know
course.
what their power is.
Of course.
But they were um, one of my pre-opening jobs was to go to each of those constituent districts and share with them the purpose of what we were trying to accomplish in Buist Academy and have them sign an agreement with the Charleston County School Board that they would allow students to cross district lines. At the time, there was a concern that Buist would be draining some of the brain power out of some of the schools in the other constituent districts. But we really weren't large enough as a whole school
That's
to
true.
drain the brain power. There are just too many smart kids. We weren't going to get them all. And, you know, your mother was very forthcoming in her desire for you to go to Buist. And she had to do things too. She had to fill out the application. She had to make sure that she was comfortable with your transportation. She had to.
Yes.
It wasn't. It wasn't an easy thing. Some parents simply weren't going to do it. They weren't going to put their kids on a bus in Red Top and
Right.
have their kids ride to Buist, downtown Charleston. What was it that made us believe that we could create that safe environment?
Right.
Well, we were just persistent. That's what we were.
And persistence is something else. It can be powerful. It can be powerful. And you're right. I remember because my bus ride was already 45 minutes coming from North Charleston, about 30, 45 minutes. And I remember hearing about kids that were coming from Red Top and across the islands. I remember riding the bus. And for those of you who are watching, because I do have people watching from various states, South Carolina, Charleston County. I always like to explain Charleston, the city of Charleston or Charleston County, as a group of islands. It's a peninsula of different islands. And so a lot of kids were crossing a bridge or two to get to Buist Academy. So that had a lot to do with the different people that I met and the different friends that I made, because we were coming from everywhere. And so that definitely made a difference. I'm hoping that now the school is the same way, having kids coming from different areas. A comment just came in that's very interesting. I want to show it here. This is a teacher. She is a teacher, and she made the other comment saying, draining the brain power. Every child has the chance to grow and be the brain power. I love that. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love it. You know, the complaints that I heard from principals as they began to see some of the students who were going into the lottery to come to Buist was that, you know, everybody's fighting to keep their status at the State Department. You know, we were being graded on test performance, and the first year, of course, Buist Academy was always in the upper echelons of the grading of schools in South Carolina. The first year wasn't as good as the second, and the third year was better, you know, so on. We got more in tune with what we were trying to accomplish for kids. So principals were afraid that if some of their higher performing students left the school to go to Buist Academy so that they could reach a higher level of challenge, that their numbers wouldn't be pulled in the right direction to be an A, B, C, or D school. There's still, I guess, some kind of grading going on in the states. Each state had their own way of leveling schools, I guess.
Right. Have you found that as you went to all these different states, and even in your consulting, those last several years doing consulting, have you found that the diversity issue is kind of similar across kind of state lines. This idea of kind of attempting to make the populations reflect the populations of the school reflect the populations of the areas that they're in. Is that something that most school boards tend to try to do? Should it be the goal?
I can't say most.
Okay.
I don't know many of the schools are built in geographic areas where there are people.
Right.
And where there are kids, not people, but kids who go with those people. And it is not always that communities are diverse.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you're building schools and communities where the communities are all white or all black, then the schools are going to tend to be that way as well.
Right.
And it has been since Brown versus the Board of Education in 1955, I believe for many, many educators, the desire to make sure that there is equitable education going on for all students. And the consulting that I did was in school districts where the need to create environments in which all students are receiving that equitable education. And so I think that there are some school boards who very much want to see that happen. I believe that in your more rural South Carolina districts, it's more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. That it. I get that. I totally get that. And we are almost out of time. I want to make sure I ask you about, because luckily you're retired now, so you don't have to deal with the craziness that's going on with COVID and education and going back to school and all of those things. What do you? I'll just frankly ask you, what is your opinion on how to best handle it? And I'll keep it specific to South Carolina because every state is different. Every area is different. I live in Los Angeles County, California, where the numbers are still ridiculously high, particularly amongst children. If you go to another state, it may not be that way. So when we're talking South Carolina, let's say, what do you think? What are they doing? How are they handling it? What do you think should be the plan?
I'm so glad I'm not sitting in the superintendent seat right now. I was a superintendent in Virginia when the highway snipers were going on.
Oh, yes.
And some districts had it more difficult than others, but my school division was split in half by I-95. So as the snipers were going up and down 95 with their murders, it was very difficult for us to decide whether or not kids could go outside, or if we closed school, when would we reopen it? There was no end we didn't know what the ending might be.
Wow.
So luckily I had a very good relationship with our sheriff and our parents, and we kept school open. But we didn't have outside recess. None of our teams could play. We allowed them to practice. This was after the middle schooler was shot right in front of his school.
Mm.
We allowed our schools to go south into another district to practice and to do their practice so that they could play if they could play away. And that was when one of the murders occurred in that area. So we couldn't do that either. Um, so I guess to say I was sitting in a seat where every day was a question about is this the right thing to do or not the right thing to do. Um, we had parents who watched the perimeters of the school. We had police and teachers who
Wow.
lined up for the kids to get on and off the buses every day. And so I'm looking at a situation now um, where a decision that a school division makes is not going to please everybody.
Mm.
And even though there was a child who tested positive on the first day of school, did not get exposed to it on the first day of school.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but certainly could have exposed other people in the school. The decision to quarantine one class versus closing the whole school, the decision basically is if you close, when do you open? And that's the decision. That's the problem that we have right now.
Right.
Under what circumstances can you open? I've heard, and I spend my morning kind of viewing the headlines and looking to see what's happening around South Carolina and other states as it relates to education. And I I think that the states that are allowing school divisions to look at their own numbers,
Mm-hmm.
allowing them to look at their own situations and their own needs, um, is the right way to go. But then that puts a lot of responsibility on individual school boards, and you're not going to please everybody.
Yes.
But it's not the same in every district. What's happening in Edisto, where I am, or in Beaufort, or in Walterboro, is not the same thing that's going to be happening in Charleston County.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you can't. You need leadership
Right.
from your state and your national government, but I don't think you can control everything from that level.
Right. Right. Yeah. At the end of the day, I totally agree. You're not going to please everybody because there's too many opinions out there and there's too many issues. Too many issues out there. Question: what district in Virginia did you work?
I was superintendent in Stafford, Virginia. I was assistant superintendent um, in Albemarle County, which is the Charlottesville area, and Henrico area, which is Richmond. So I was
Okay.
assistant superintendent for instruction in both of those two districts and superintendent in Stafford, Virginia.
Okay.
We were the new suburb to DC,
Huh.
literally,
That
right
makes
outside of
sense.
Quantico, right outside of Quantico.
Right outside of Quantico. Yeah. I would definitely like to say that I am very proud to say that the current principal of Buist Academy is the first Black woman ever, Miss Chante White. I'm hoping to get to meet her at some point because that is something I never imagined, and it's not even in a negative way. It's just something I never thought about. I just never thought of the idea, just never came in my mind that there would be a Black female being the principal of a school synonymous with academic excellence. So
Ah,
I'm so
uh,
excited.
as you should be.
Yeah,
Um, and for the 30 plus years, 35 now possibly,
yeah, 35.
there have been four principals at Buist Academy.
That's amazing.
And Mrs. White is the fourth.
That that's amazing. I wish my high school could say the same. um, I just Because I am in love. I carry a lot of pride for North Charleston High School. While I look at Buist Academy very fondly, I carry a ton of alumni pride for North Charleston High School. Yeah, so I'm really and praying for a better a better school, because I don't want that school to be lost. I don't want it to be lost. So yeah. So Miss Murray, I'm going to show this question. I'm going to let you see that question, and you can answer it as you want. Um, so, but no.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, Lolita.
So yeah. So I am so grateful that you sat down with me. I didn't want to hold you for more than an hour, and we're right at an hour. So I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking with one of your former students. I
love it. I love it. I love it.
Like on cloud 9 right now, because I think it is so cool to be able to talk with someone who saw me this big when I was a little girl. And I'm very happy that you don't remember that horrible first year. But
as soon as I saw your picture on the website, I recognized you.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you. And
some
sitting
things
down, some things don't change. It's true. Sitting down with you today is definitely a great way. I will treasure this, a great way to honor my mother on her birthday today. So thank you so much.
And thank you for honoring me by allowing me to talk about, one of my girlfriends said the other day, lady friends, I guess. She said, Buist will always be a part of you. And that's right. It will always be a part of me.
I will always be a part of you. When you think, you were a part of the ground, the foundation of what became what it is. So you can't talk about Buist without talking about the beginning, and Mrs. Jean Murray is the beginning. So thank you so much, Miss Murray.
Don't be a stranger.
I won't. You are going to actually be receiving a thank you gift from me very soon. So look for that. And because I want you to know how grateful I am, and I want you to be safe. Enjoy your retirement. Okay.
You're in a high area, so you be safe too.
I am. I'm staying inside. That's why I'm doing a podcast.
There you go.
Thank you so much, Miss Murray. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. So that was Miss Jean Murray from South Carolina. I am so grateful for her to just join in. You guys, if you missed it, go back and watch it. It will be on Facebook for another couple days until it is posted on the podcast itself. You can go to RuthinaPorterfield.com and subscribe to Liberated Conversations with Ruthina and listen to it there. You can watch it on YouTube Live as well. Thank you so much for joining. And remember, the conversation doesn't end here. Join the conversation. Leave comments on YouTube, on Facebook, on the podcast itself. You guys, I want to hear what you think. I want to hear what you have to say. In the meantime, please be safe out there. Peace, stay cool, and God bless.